we go. Hello everybody, Pitter Patter, we're back at her. Today's episode is all about the grandeur term of director of photography. Before I launch into what a director of photography is and what I mean by that, because what I mean by that might be a little bit different than what you think I mean by that. This isn't one of those basic videos that just lists off all the different people that work on a film set and tell you what their job is. That's not at all what this is. This is something different. And to lead into that, I'm gonna tell you a little anecdote, little story. I was teaching for a filmmaking organization here in this city, and this organization would have these networking parties once a month. And as an introvert, I avoided these like the plague. My anxiety would just go through the roof having to kind of work a room. Most often I didn't go to these. I found some excuse to not go. But I went on like one or two occasions. And I thought it was quite interesting when I went because I found something quite peculiar about them. The first thing was that everybody would get this name tag. And on the name tag, it would say your name. And they would also say sort of like what you do in film. So for example, like John would be a writer, Sally would be like a director, so on and so forth. And so as you're working the room, you already know, like, is this person somebody that can help me with my film? Or, are they doing something interesting that I can be involved in? That kind of thing. And it's a good way to spark conversation. And I remember these photographs being taken of like everybody standing together and, in different groups of people talking. And like 90% of people had on their name tag, director. And I thought, that is a statistically large amount of directors to be in the same room. These weren't like established directors. A lot of these, some of them were, full stop, some of them were, but a gross majority of them were newer filmmakers that were just starting out. And I came to realize that when everyone sort of starts their filmmaking journey, the only job that they can really grasp onto is being a director. So if you don't really know anything about film, you know what a director kind of does. And that's exciting. And you can, I'm gonna go make a thing. Well, I made this thing, I'm a director, right? And that's true. I also went down this road. So I was directing and calling myself a director in the first few years of my career. And I also did quite well. I had a film in a major film festival. I was getting jobs directing in television and in commercials. I was kind of going on that path. I thought I was going to be a director until I really learned about what directing really is. I quickly discovered that being a director means that you are a fundraiser, you are a professional deck maker, you are a telemarketer, you are a business person, you are a babysitter, you are a hostage negotiator. As someone that has to also endure like a 98% rejection rate. The list goes on, and none of those things ever come to mind when we think of Stanley Kubrick or Steven Spielberg. So a lot of people that start on this journey of like, I'm a director, quickly learn that being a director is not what Hollywood portrays. And the same can be said for the director of photography. I don't think anything I'm about to tell you is going to dissuade you. I don't think I'm going to tell you any horror stories. I just want to give you a fuller picture of what's expected of you so that as you're planning your journey, you know that there's just not one single skill set that you have to have, that there's multiple skill sets that are being asked of you at every point of the day, all the time. Let's start with a little bit of nomenclature, because the job of director of photography, or DP or DOP, well, that term has been in use since nearly the beginning of the film industry, and sometimes, as far back as, say, Citizen Kane, you'll just have it listed as photography in the case of Greg Toland. This is all just a fancy word to describe the job given to a cinematographer. Another word that dates back as far as the film industry itself, well into the end of the 1800s, when all films were shown in a cinema. So the word made a lot of sense. Now, I'm going to take you back to that first anecdote before we move any further, because at those networking parties, I had one other encounter that is of note. I remember standing near the door, and a gentleman came up to me, couldn't have been more than 22 years of age. And we got to talking, and he's like, yeah, I shoot, blah, 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 I'm a DP. And he gives me his card, and on his card is his name. It's a very nice looking card. And it said Director of Photography. And at that moment, I thought, well, this is quite brazen to have this on your card. Not that there's anything against this person, because in fact, I am a very firm believer in fake it till you make it. So if it means that you got to put the job you want on your card, by all means. I just felt that at his age, it was unlikely that he would actually have enough life experience and enough experience in the industry, unless his father was a cinematographer, that he would know enough to know what that word on his card meant. I think that in the digital age of democratization of content and everybody has a camera and everybody's a DP, we have this diluted idea of what a real director of photography does. And I'm going to say something a bit potentially divisive right now, which is just my impression, my opinion about when to use cinematographer and when to use director of photography. My position and my opinion is that you are, by and large, just a cinematographer. The director of photography is a title that is given to you when you get hired onto a production, whether it be a film, a commercial, a music video, what have you. If you are not currently on a production, you are just an out-of-work director of photography or a cinematographer between two contracts. To say you are a director of photography, yes, I understand that it has a certain sentiment that gets carried with it, that you do certain types of work, no different than saying cinematographer versus videographer. There's a different understanding about what those two people do. And so I don't fault anybody for calling themselves a director of photography, but I think even on the very highest levels, we're playing a risky game about what we say we do. So Roger Deakins, sure, he can have that on his card because that's basically the only jobs he ever does is high-level film and commercial work, right? But for the most part, I would suggest that most people refer to themselves as cinematographers. I prefer to do that. You're welcome to disagree. Now, let's talk about what the job of a director of photography is. So you've got hired on to a production, right? What are you tasked with? What do you need to be able to do on a daily basis? I'm going to run through about 6 or 7 ideas here. Now, these observations come from my 13 years working in the film industry, both as someone who's worked exclusively alongside and for cinematographers, as well as being one myself. So I think I have a pretty good handle on what that job generally entails, although I may be off by a point or two depending on, your perspective as a cinematographer. So let's start with the obvious. Number one, you are in charge of the camera, lighting, and grip department. I think most of us know that. However, the DP is also quality control. And this is something I can't underline enough. You are also, as a director of photography, unofficially the quality control of everything that happens in front of that camera. Now, that includes sound and production design. If I'm the DP on a job and I see that the sound is not going to be good, that something is off, like the sound recordist, the boom op is in the wrong spot, or there's, some interference noise or whatever, it is my job to stop production and make sure that that is taken care of. And I will always argue that sound is infinitely more important than the visual image. You can actually get away a lot with a weird or imperfect visual image, but if the sound isn't good, there is no Hollywood level DP with no amount of money that can fix and make what you're shooting interesting. So I've personally been on in many situations where I was like, oh, that's like not my department. And then the director's like, yeah, we can't use that because the sound was garbage. So all that work we did, all that whole day we spent, had my team, all the gear that got hauled, all of it's for nothing because I saw something and thought, nah, it's not my job. The other thing is production design. So I'm not the production designer. But my job is to break the hearts of a lot of directors and producers who cart me around to different locations and go, this is where we want to shoot. And I say, no, we're not shooting here because there's no way to make this look good. We have to have a good sense of like, can I light this place properly, right? Do I have the windows I need? Do I have the ceiling height that I need? And then aesthetically, do I have the room that I can, make sure that I guide the eye to where the eye needs to go? And these are conversations that you have with production designers and with directors about, are these the right shade of curtains? Should this couch be here or should the couch be there? Because if the couch is here, I can move my camera here, but then that looks kind of garbage. But if we put the couch here, that looks so much better, but now I'm limited in my movements. And we talk about, with production designers about where we're gonna place practical lamps in the scene, how many, how light they are, what shade is gonna be on them, what clothes people are wearing. Is it that color of red or is it that color of blue? Is that shirt too loud? Is that shirt too quiet? How does that make us feel? That's your job as a DP. So you're not just ordering the camera package, bossing a bunch of people around and go, light this, turn that off, turn that on. There's this whole other world that you're responsible for that unless you take the time to educate yourself in and use your voice and be knowledgeable about those things, you're not really useful as a DP. If you walk on set and you look at other departments and just say, oh, that's not my problem, then you won't have a job for very long. The next thing that you are is a politician. Politics is often front and center of the daily life of a director of photography. You have two competing missions. One is to get your crew, your grips, electrics, camera assistants, camera operators, to believe in you and to do good work. And the second is to get the director and the assistant director or the client to believe in you and trust you. Now, these two elements are in continuous competition. As a former technician myself, I'm very sensitive to the needs and demands of my crew, and I know exactly what it's like to work a 12 to 16-hour day on your feet. However, as a cinematographer, I don't get work unless my director trusts me to get the job done and I can bring them great ideas. What a technician believes is required to do their job properly and safely can sometimes be in contravention to what an assistant director needs in those moments. And so there's a lot of conflict that happens on set, and this is also one of the reasons why we see a lot of well-publicized and serious accidents happen on set. As a director of photography, you are in the hub of that, right? You are responsible to your crew. Your crew, if they don't like what you're doing, will walk off the job. And if you don't have a crew, you don't have a film. Meanwhile, you have to turn to your assistant director and your director and possibly a client in the commercial world and be able to assure them that we'll get this shot, we'll get it on time, it's gonna look great, and there's no accidents. In neither of those cases can you really guarantee anything, right? But you have to do your best job to triage every situation. The longer that you work as a DP, the better that you get at planning and managing departments that are most often always in conflict with each other. And being a great DP is also about being a great leader who plans well, remains calm in the face of challenge and conflict, inspires all their peers to do their best. That is the fundamentals of being a great DP. And kind of going back to the kid with the card, even if he grew up with a parent who was the DP, it's unlikely he would have the life skills to understand how to manage that very, very well. And most young DPs that I meet that are successful and that are repped generally stay away from that, and they're just kind of coddled and put into a position where they don't have to deal with that. But at some point, they're going to have to, and they're going to have to learn to do that. And that's sort of the accepted idea. The next thing that we are mathematicians. Now, take it from somebody who failed high school math twice and was fairly convinced at the time that there was no real-world application to most of this stuff. The laws of light, however, are algorithmic, and you need to understand light values, power levels, optical distances, all that sort of stuff. And that requires a fairly strong sense of basic mathematics. You also have to work with budgets, and you have to know how to negotiate the best terms, prices, and get the right gear for the job. You have to know where to spend and where to cut. Along with the AD, you have to be really good at scheduling the day. You need to know how long a day is, where the sun is going to be at all times, and how long the sun is going to be there. You clearly don't need a master's in physics to do this job because, well, me, but also it's proof that it can be learned. But it's just so much of what I continually do involves mathematical work. You're also a technical researcher. Not all of us are like this, by the way. Some DPs don't even understand how to turn on a camera, and that's not a dig. It's just that in the work they do, based on the team and the resources they have, they kind of don't need to. Other than giving camera operators directions, or the gaffer directions, they're just kind of parked by the monitor all day. So it's not really a lot of their day-to-day decision-making. Within that portion of people that do that kind of work, I would say 90% of them have come from a place where they very much understand how cameras work and very much understand how lighting works. So it's very much an anomaly. By and large, most working DPs have a very strong knowledge when it comes to what their tools are capable of and where their limitations are. And they invest a lot of time into understanding the post-production process so that they can deliver the best possible footage to the post-production team, whether it be an editor or a colorist. They also need to know that if, for whatever reason, a piece of kit is unavailable or is malfunctioning, that they can select another piece very quickly and simply that can be swapped out seamlessly. They also test their gear relentlessly and continually, always looking for sweet spots in that experience and or constraints. And being able to understand this whole holistic package about what the lights are capable of, how many we need, what the cameras are, and what the lenses are capable of, allow you to be much more in tune with what the needs are of the director and the producers. The next thing that DPs are film critics. Now, again, this isn't all of us, this isn't everyone, but it's a lot of us. Film, like many art forms, is an iterative art. Nobody is really inventing anything, at least very rarely. We're stealing and adapting 99.9% of the time. Maybe you saw something on a film set once or an Instagram reel and you're like, that's a cool idea. And I'm gonna try that on my next film idea and film production. And that has its value and it has its use. There's no question about that. Its value is somewhat boxed in and limited, even if you manage to use it. What's much more impactful and what you see on a large scale with very successful and bankable DPs is a literacy of film and a knowledge of the filmmaking process as just a viewer of it. And so you could watch, again, films like Citizen Kane and compare it to films like Memento. You can look at, oh, why do we do this shot? And then why do we cover it with this? Or why does this come before this when we make a cut here? What works, what doesn't? Somebody with a very, very good literacy, I say, in film is going to be able to take that and implement it into their daily work. So they can sit down and work with a director and create a shot list and say, we need this shot and this shot, but this one is not gonna cut with anything else. It just stands out weird. And unless you want that, it's not really gonna work. And that's not just from filmmaking experience, making the films. A lot of it comes from seeing it played out time and time and time again. And you can make the argument that doing what everybody else does is just a recipe for boredom and nothing advances in that way. And that's not untrue. The way we tell stories has sort of fallen into a bit of a rhythm. And the way we tell a visual story hasn't really changed much in 100 years. So I'm willing to bet that being a good DP means having seen a lot of films and remembered a lot of them and understood what made them work. There are many other things I can add, but this last one is either the least or the most important one. As a director of photography, you are first and foremost an artist. You have a voice and you have experience. Most directors will either lean on one of those or most likely both. And if you're not out making art on your own time or visiting museums, reading books, if you're not contemplating and promoting your view on the world, you're of limited use to a director because you have to have a perspective and you have to have gone on a journey as an artist to be able to understand that when I put a camera down here, it means something to me and I can advocate for that versus when I put a camera up here or when I can add a lot of light to this scene, it means something to me and it says something versus if I keep it dark. And that's why you have cinematographers that even though they're not the director on the film, they have a look. The director chooses them because they have a viewpoint on the world. Like Chivo, for example, for more than 10 years, has done a lot of handheld camera, wide angle lens work. That's now influenced so much of our filmmaking in a modern context. You see it in commercials, you see it in films, you see it in music videos. He was somebody that had a very distinct vision and brought that vision to a director. Now, of course, it can work against you if you're a one-note wonder. I don't necessarily advise being that. You are a unique person with a unique lived experience and a unique perspective on art in the world. And that is your calling card. And that is your job as a DP, is to be able to say, if this is what you want, this is how I see it, and to kind of show somebody that so that they can either get on side or just respond, and you can work together to find a mutual solution. And with all of that said, I ask you this one last question. Are you prepared to be a director of photography? Or does the title just sound cool to you?